Legendary comic book artist Steve Ditko passed away in his home this week at the age of 90. Ditko was responsible for the co-creation of The Amazing Spider-Man and most of his iconic villains for the first 4 years of the series. Outside of Spider-Man, Ditko was responsible for a host of other characters across the industry, from Doctor Strange to Squirrel Girl to Hawk and Dove to The Question and Blue Beetle. The impact that Ditko's career had on the industry cannot be overstated. Private and reclusive, Ditko had no known survivors. Nevertheless, he will be missed. Steve Ditko is gone, but his work will live on forever. The Spider-Man franchise casts a large web, which now includes Nicolas Cage? Collider is reporting that Nicolas Cage has been tapped to join the cast of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Cage will apparently be voicing another alternate universe version of Peter Parker, in this case the dark and troubled Spider-Man Noir. This makes at least 4 Spider-People in the movie, and who knows how many we'll ultimately see. In other animated news, Netflix made some big announcements at Anime Expo this week. Castlevania Season 2 is on the way with an official release date of October 26th. The second season will continue the adventures of Trevor Belmont as he teams up with Alucard and Sepha Belnades for 8 more episodes of vampire-killing action. Also announced was Godzilla City on the Edge of Battle, which will release next week on July 18th. The animated movie is a sequel to last year's Godzilla Planet of Monsters about humanity trying to reclaim the Earth 20,000 years after Godzilla forced them to flee their world. Also coming out of Anime Expo, Sunrise is teaming up with Legendary Pictures for a live-action Gundam film. The movie is still in the very early production stages, but for those concerned about a cheap licensing cash grab like Dragon Ball Evolution, Sunrise will be directly involved in this movie, so that's something. For closer releases, I can't find a segue from Infinity War to Dwayne Johnson, but nevertheless, Skyscraper. The Rock is, once again, a dad desperate to save his family from disaster, in this case a burning building, and just to make it that much more difficult, this time he's doing it all on one leg. Over in video games, it must be RPG Week this week, starting with an RPG Maker entry, The Chronicles of Quiver Dig, a crude comedy with characters inspired by fans and supporters of the developer's past work, so that's kinda cute. For something more anime, Remindry is a seemingly technical RPG that oddly enough seems more interested in menus than anime waifus. But there's no shortage of those elsewhere. Sega's Shining Resonance Refrain comes to North America this week on PC and consoles with your typical JRPG tales of heroes, dragons, and fantasy world saving. And headed back to the retro style, Pegasus 5 Gone Astray looks like a lost relic from the Genesis days. With a branching sci-fi story and romance options, it's basically a 16-bit version of Mass Effect. Moving away from RPGs, Ghostly Matter is another retro title. This one's a Metroidvania game in the NES style featuring a paranormal investigator fighting a score of ghosts, demons, and monsters. It actually looks like a better version of the Ghostbusters game than the actual NES Ghostbusters game. For something a little more modern, The Free Ones is an interesting looking first-person platformer that has you Spider-Manning your way through a kinda neat looking world. And if you don't have enough fighting games with generously endowed characters in your life, Koihime Enbu Ryo Rei is yet another one that you can add to the list. And finally on PC, Prototype Mansion Used No Cover is a rare throwback game that aims for the 32-bit era aesthetic. A little research tells me that this game has actually been around since at least last November, but it seems that the recent Resident Evil hype has led the developers to shoot for a Steam release. Over on the Switch, Paddlebox is a cool-looking boxing game that mixes Punch-Out with an 80s underground comic look, and if you can't wait for the new Mega Man, 20XX looks like a worthy substitute for the time being. Available on the PS4, Xbox, and Switch, this is a Mega Man roguelite. An interesting concept, especially when you take into account the possibility of co-op play. And if you want some more Metroid action, Ghost 1.0 is a somewhat sillier take on the Metroidvania concept from the creators of Unepic. With a cool possession mechanic and lots of cool weapons, this looks like a lot of fun. For another silly game that likes taking the piss out of genres, Holy Potatoes A Weapon Shop is headed for the PS4, Xbox, and Switch this week to parody everything you love and hate about gaming loot systems. Back to Nintendo exclusives, another Wii U port is getting new life this week as Captain Toad's Treasure Tracker makes its way to both the Switch and the 3DS. But the biggest release this week has to be yet another JRPG, but this one is a doozy. Octopath Traveler may have a weird name, but it is a solid game with 8 characters that each have their own story and game mechanics. The demo is already available, and it alone is worth hours of play if you need to be sold on the final project. Wrapping things up with this week's awesome video, Gaijin Goomba has a good rundown on all the historical influences on everybody's favorite Hylian pseudo-ninja, Sheik.
This is yet another simple connection to real-life ninja in the form of their Metsubushi, or literally eye-closer bombs. A nasty mix of dirt, pepper, sand, and iron powder funneled into dry eggshells and sealed with paper. And yes, they were as difficult to make as it sounds, usually requiring days of preparation and make. Grinding powder, carefully hollowing out eggshells without breaking them. But these little bombs were invaluable for blinding and distracting enemies so a ninja could make the killer escape. Or you could just live in Hyrule where Metsubushi bombs literally grow on trees.
That's everything for this week, so what other Spider-Man do you hope appear in Into the Spider-Verse? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, I appreciate likes and appreciate subscribers even more, so be sure to share this with a friend and have a great week!